So we have Ariel with Muse and their mother company, and we have Scott Nelson who's joining me here today as well. So if you guys like, maybe we could start off with the ethics topic.
Sure.
The game plan here, folks, is we're going to go into 3 topics. We're going to talk about ethics, privacy, and data sovereignty, and each of us is going to kick off one of the different topics and then just kind of discuss it, maybe 10 minutes a pop per topic. So ethics is first. Ariel, I know you were passionate about this. Let's
Deeply
boot it off.
passionate. So the goal of today is to give all of you a set of frameworks that you can use to walk away and say, okay, am I acting ethically? Am I doing the right thing for privacy? Am I doing the right thing for data? So we're going to try to make this as practical as possible with as many kind of useful tips and tricks in this space. We've spent a lot of time, we have a massive database of brain data at Interaxon, and so we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we use our database appropriately and what we do with our data. I've also spent a lot of time thinking about what the industry overall needs to do in order to act ethically and keep us safe. So we brought together a panel of some of the biggest players in the space, Emotive, myself, NeuroSky, OpenBCI, Intheon, and we all came together to create a set of ethical principles to try to guide ethical action, knowing that we're going to have a proliferation of devices that allow you to connect directly with your brain or biosignals, and in doing so, offer the opportunity for people to really fuck with your head, literally. And so we wanted to really get ahead of this problem and create a set of ethical standards that would ensure that if you upheld these standards, you'd be acting ethically. Now, I know everybody in this room wants to be acting ethically and has the highest intentional standards for that ethical action, but you can even be acting unethically without realizing it. So I'll take you into that in a little detail. The 5 pillars that we set up are privacy, which is totally obvious, and we're going to dive into that at depth. Security. So in order to act ethically, you have to ensure that somebody who's working in your system is secure, they are safe, they're not going to be electrocuted by it, and they're safe in every way possible. Efficacy, which means that the thing does what you say it does. And in this space, when we're creating things that are so nascent, it's not always obvious that it does what it does. You think that a TDCS machine is going to enhance your working memory by activating your frontal midline theta. And there's a couple studies that suggest that somebody else's work suggests that's going to happen. But at what point can you say definitively, yes, this is efficacious? And you can't possibly go out and say this is going to improve your frontal midline theta if you haven't done a significant study over hundreds of people. And that takes a lot of money to get there. So you have to be really cautious in how you communicate around efficacy and be really clear and transparent about what your real efficacy is. Yes, we've tried this on 50 people and it seems to kind of improve it. Some studies sort of suggest this could happen. Be honest. It doesn't matter. You don't need to sell shit that's not going to work for people. Just be honest and people can make their own decisions. So privacy, security, efficacy, transparency. So transparent about what it is, what it does, what it's going to do for you, what happens to your data. And then agency. And agency is possibly one of the least considered aspects in ethical action. So agency means that by using this device, you are in no way decreasing your own personal sense of agency, freedom, and ability to choose. So the most extreme example of this is you've got a brainwave device and the government's going to use it to hack into your brain and control your mind. But there's a lot of much that's not something we need to be concerned about. Okay. Just, checking it. It's not a fire drill.
It's still safe and ethical.
Cool.
All right.
I'm going to keep talking until somebody tells me
I don't smell any
otherwise.
smoke, so I'm just going to...
Because we're inside.
Yeah,
it smells like smoke out there. Not
oh, yeah, true.
Cool. So agency. So the obvious thing is going to be somebody's going to control your brain. The unobvious things are as we create technologies that nudge us and guide us, they are in some ways removing our agency. So if you have an app that tells you to drink a glass of water when the bell goes off, that's awesome. It's supporting you. It's keeping you hydrated. It's also decreasing your agency because it's deciding for you what to do. So one of the approaches that we've taken at Muse to avoid this problem is to help teach people rather than tell people or demand of people. So be really cautious when you think about how you create your technology, that you are teaching people things that they still have the choice to do or not do. So in the world of the internet, we all are well aware of recommendation engines that recommend all the movies that you should see and the websites you should see next and things you should buy next. And they, in a sense, create your world. In some ways, this is a decrement of your agency. It is narrowing your focus. So be very, very cautious in how you think about creating technologies that enhance people's agencies, their freedoms, their choice, rather than decreasing them. We, for example, will not work with anybody in neuromarketing. It's a really common request we get. Great, you can read people's brains. Let's now use that to sell shit, people shit they don't need. Totally obvious place where you're going to decrease somebody's agency by going down that route. So little food for thought, make sure you're taking care of privacy, security, efficacy, transparency, and agency, and then you probably have a formula for ethical action. We have an organization, the Center for Responsible Brainwave Technologies. The website is responsiblebraintech.org that has white papers, frameworks, guidelines to set out all of these principles and how you can uphold them within your organization and some of the positive and negative use cases that come out of it. Let's open this up. Thoughts on it?
Yeah, lots of places.
Ethics.
Scott, why don't you take it away? No, please. In terms of just initial response, we got a lot of meat here, some pillars that I think by themselves could be books. Any initial responses, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed, and when I was asked to be part of this panel, I recommended you, having gone through Muse's approach to the way it informed me and onboarded me, and then gave me the choice to participate in research external, and gave me an idea about how that data was going to be shared, which I really appreciate.
Honesty. And if you ask people, and if you're transparent, they probably will agree. So we have a research program, and we can't do anything with your data unless you choose to join our research program. If you choose to join our research program, then we can look at your data to gain further insights to improve the technology and partner with third-party accredited researchers. And about 70% of people say, yes, I want to join the research program, let you know about my handedness, and then we take that data, we de-identify it, and then we're able to use it with researchers to write research papers. And so if you're transparent, people will want to participate, but you have to be truly transparent the whole way along, and it has to be an opt-in. So it's like, yes, I choose to give you my data, not I forgot to click this button and therefore you now own my data.
So yeah, we could poke into any of these. I think these are all fruitful pillars to at least begin a conversation that's meaningful here. I could imagine, I also like the term fuck with people's heads literally. I'm going to totally steal that. That's
Point
awesome.
here and now.
I'm going to credit you big time, and I get to swear from stage without having done it first, so I know it's okay. Agency is a tough one, and you guys have thought about this beyond obviously this short conversation. Seems tough because almost anything could be conceived of as molding people's actions in some way. I mean, okay, I hire somebody for a job. Well, I give them a job description. Hey, narrowing their agency to some degree. These are going to be the core deliverables. Well, geez, I'm like determining their future for them. I'm a bad guy. So I could see almost any kind of marketing communications, almost any kind of communication writ large, potentially infringing on agency. Do you guys have boundaries where maybe there are clear lines in the neurotech domain?
There's not yet clear lines because this is really new.
Yeah.
And when we create technologies that help to shape behavior, and this is like what all of us are doing, we're helping to shape a novel form of behavior, you are inherently, in some ways, impinging on people's agency with their consent. You are now a co-creator in this shifting of agency. I want to sleep better. I want this app to tell me when to sleep, how to sleep, and where to sleep, and please just put me to sleep if you can. But that is potentially, stepping on a dangerous toe. And so you just have to be really mindful and have an open conversation about it because the boundaries aren't clear.
I really like that idea of being a part of what the agency limiting things are. In other words, hello, here's this app. We can encourage any of these things. Would you like to? That's really cool, a co-creative kind of facet there. I think that the specifics are going to have to get fleshed out because it's so new, but I think that might be a way to think about it. Scott, in your organization, is agency a part of the conversation in the mix and the considerations with data now at all?
Not nearly enough, for sure. One of the things that we do in our foundation, which is based in Vancouver, by the way. Shout out to Canada.
Both of you.
CanCon.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm a lonely Yankee here.
Is we publish we started last year, we publish a report every year that we call the Quantified Self report card. And so we go through sort of the top players in that space that are collecting data, especially sort of constant data streams, Garmin and other players. And we go through line by line through their terms of service, their privacy agreements, and then we rate them on how clear they are, how much how respecting they are of user rights, basically, which really is sort of at the heart of agency.
Is that right, by the way? In other words, can people find that?
That's what I
Yes,
was just going to
yes.
ask. How can everybody in this audience use your
Yes.
service
A
to help them
framework.
create
Okay.
better
Well,
data?
I did bring some slides, so
Oh, let's
maybe
hit it.
I'll-
Okay,
maybe I'll just
take it away.
okay, I'll just blast through some slides.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
that's
please.
okay, because we go over that. So I just want to share a little bit of my data because I collect a lot of data on myself, and there's where I like to cycle in Vancouver. There's where Google's been tracking me obviously for a while. And part of agency for us and our position is taking more control over which data leaves your devices and the extent to which you're being tracked. And this is a great open source project, and this is just showing sort of the results from one day in our household. It's blocking almost 25%, 1/4 of the tracking beacons and other things that are trying to, inadvertently pull data out of our home network.
Can we just stop on that for a second?
Sure.
Tell us how tracked you are in your own house.
To some
You're the average person. How
China
tracked they
level,
are in
like,
their own house.
yeah, where you at?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, highly tracked because both my wife and I wear Garmin devices, which are, uploading a tremendous amount of information. We also happen to be users of Android, which there's a study that came out last week or the week before showing that Android uploads 10 times as much data as the iPhone does. What is that data exactly, and where's it going, and how's it being used for? But on the other hand, by taking proactive measures, being very careful about the apps that you install, reading and understanding the privacy policies, being aware of what else is going out there, and putting active pieces in place, you can take steps to sort of protect yourself to a greater extent. But it's definitely there's the idea that data is the new oil and needs to be grabbed and collected as much and hoarded as much as possible. It's true. I mean, it really is true. So, I mean, this is a little bit about what we're doing. And here's the latest scores from this report, which just came out last week. You'll see some very familiar names in here. The report is available for free. We don't ask for your email address or anything like that. On our website, which I'll have at the end, you can download it and look through this. And we've got a very comprehensive description of what's happened over the past year, shifting. In particular, GDPR was a very big thing in terms of raising consciousness around for companies mostly. I mean, we had that in combination with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which were nicely complementary in some ways, raising it in the public consciousness and then having this response from the European Union. And we're very big on open source technology and how it might provide alternatives to some of the big cloud plays that we see happening now. And this is a project that we're very fond of called Nextcloud, which you're looking for sort of a private intranet kind of thing. This brings a lot of sovereignty to your data for sure. And
Can you define sovereignty just for the
yeah, sovereignty is sovereignty is rule, the rule of data.
pretty legal?
It's we want to be cautious and knowledgeable about how much data is sort of slipping inadvertently away from us, where it's going, how it's being used. And I think there's some very good models. This is one that I think is absolutely amazing. This is out of Switzerland. It's called the My Data Cooperative. And so it's a different corporate structure than we may be used to, especially in Silicon Valley. If any of you have ever chose to to work with a credit union rather than a bank, you may have been choosing to work with a cooperative rather than a standard corporate model where there's different, it's still a corporation, but it's owned by the members and the members control sort of what happens and are also remunerated for it. So this is a Swiss project where pulls in data from all sorts of different sources, then gives you control over which studies you may want to have your data go and be used by. And I think it's a really interesting model since we're talking about...
When you say studies, how do you mean?
Yeah, in this case, they're talking about actual medical studies. So I guess it would be the equivalent of FDA-approved stuff flowing into a system, but you get to choose of the various data that's being collected on you, which you would prefer and which studies you would contribute your data to.
Do you two see a future where clearly, being in people's heads and seeing how much medical data out there, where if we have our own data in our own sovereign place, that we'd be able to have regular transactions for the folks that might want to access it? I can imagine sometimes that would be companies, but maybe sometimes it would be healthcare. Is this part of what the future looks like?
Part of what the future looks like is all of us having our own data clouds with a sort of Bitcoin-like exchange where we can then grant access to pieces of our data for people for whom it would be of interest. So if there's a pharma company doing a study and you happen to have a condition that they are looking at, and so they want to see your genetic data in order to learn more about that condition, you can trade them access, and you can do it all on a lovely little Bitcoin-like exchange through the blockchain and get access. It's a very easy transaction, and we're all going to be able to profit from all of our data. So we will all own all of our data and be able to rent it out in little tiny bits to anybody who needs it.
Passive income at last.
Yes.
At last.
And I know a few companies that are running to build this.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very encouraging, and it's part of that whole trend which other speakers have spoken about towards decentralization rather than it all being pooled in one area and under the control of one organization. Distributing it across different places and giving more control back to various other players in there, particularly the individual. And this is just some of the solutions that are emerging now to make this kind of thing possible. And you mentioned blockchain, I mentioned the cooperative business model. And for those of you who are in particular, I think, concerned about privacy and security, some of the breakthroughs in encryption, particularly around this notion of homomorphic encryption, the ability to store data safely in an encrypted format and yet still through some mathematical wizardry be able to draw out what you need for machine learning and with large data sets. There's something very, very encouraging there.
Can you give a little bit more insight to the people in the audience who are building things around the parameters that you check to see if a company has data sovereignty?
Those scores, that was cool. I want to know.
Yeah. Can you dig into them and
can we go
really dig into and show us what those scores are so that we can be concerned about making sure that we do the right thing to get a good score?
Yeah. I mean, by all means, download the report because it's very comprehensive. I mean, it's only 30 pages long, and it's nice reading. We go into great depth into the methodology that we used on that report. And so we basically looked at sort of three main areas. One was around the privacy. One was around how much sort of user agency was granted by it. Is there a reverse on this?
Yeah, there's the red one.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. There you go. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Oop.
And forward. Bam.
And the other one was around what we could glean from what other third parties the app would be sharing with, and whether or not you had control over the sharing of that with other third parties. So we can see here the real winner, in our opinion, this year was an ovulation app out of Germany called Clue, which I don't know if anyone here is familiar with.
I've used it.
Were you impressed with their approach to agency and how comfortable you felt after reading the terms of service and all that?
So that implies that I read the terms of service.
Yeah, people don't do that. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't even read the terms of service on a lot of things, and I build these technologies. Yes.
Do what we say.
Yeah.
On it.
Yeah. So, I mean, our hope...
But that's a super important point. Like, you are building things for people who are not reading the terms of service and they just trust you. So please do the right thing and don't like hide bullshit in the terms of service.
Yeah, and I think there really needs to be a lot of work done within our industry to make it easier to understand what's going on, because you know, what has happened is as legal has got more and more involved, and there's more things to say and more things to protect yourself from. These things have become just massive, massive documents, you know. And there was one study a while ago that if we actually read, you know, all of the terms of service for all of the services that we use in a year, we would use a month of our life in that year just reading the terms of service.
Yeah, I do that right now, actually. I know what that's like. I can't get as much work done as I'd like. It's horrible.
And so I would say if there's one big takeaway in data sovereignty, it's the notion that users should own their own data. So that's something to really think about as you are building your app and your data architecture. How can you ensure that a user owns their own data and can always rescind that data from the cloud? So it becomes complicated because if you ever want to do anything with that data, you want to do it in the aggregate. So you have to really be careful how you set up your tables and the relationships between those data sources so that a user can always rescind their own data, and you can also aggregate and de-identify that data, but then go back and be able to pull that data out if a single user wants it. So that's kind of the holy grail of being able to create a ethical and appropriate data structure.
Yeah, fantastic.
Did you want to touch on this specifically?
You know, I didn't know that Yuval was held in such high esteem in Silicon Valley already, so I was like, oh, I'm going to really shock them. But everyone knows and is following this guy, which is great. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's kind of the leading public intellectual and is really sort of tackling this issue and foreseeing, you know, a lot of the issues that could come out of this. So, you know, we certainly take him very seriously and like what he's doing right now. I highly recommend his last two books, Homo Deus and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I know Nicole mentioned him as well earlier. I did want to throw out a bit of a challenge here to this group, if it's okay.
Go for it, man. Yeah, hit it.
Yeah. So yesterday, when we were having the X Prize process in the morning with Joe Hudson, you know, I didn't have a strong sort of X Prize thing, but you know, other things have come out of it, including presentations here today and getting to know more of what's going on here. And part of the vision with the Human Data Commons, in addition to, you know, analyzing and working and educating on behalf of, you know, these user agreements and how this gets used, is the vision that, you know, with so many amazing products and services being developed in this space with roughly the same direction that we're moving in, I think, around the topics of transformative technology, that being well-being and health and joy, I think there might be the possibility for some kind of cooperative to emerge out of this group of companies. And you kind of alluded to it with the ethics thing, which is great, but I think around data there might be something as well. And I kind of had the flash this morning when we were getting the presentation on evolutionary biology, and had the vision of kind of the Overmind cooperative, which would be basically a transformative tech cuddle puddle of companies that would be sharing their data for the mutual good of where we're all trying to go here.
Did you say Overlord or what?
Overmind.
Overmind, yeah. Freudian slip or something.
Well, yeah, that's a good one. Hand it to Singularity Net and see what happens.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
And I love it when any business relationship can be described as a cuddle puddle. So speaking of cuddle puddles, let's move to privacy.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
Yeah,
all right. So
please.
we got 7 minutes left. We'll riff a little bit on privacy. I was actually planning on dishing something out to you two who kind of tackle data. We look at business models. We assess maybe what we know the executives are kind of nervous about in terms of PR gaffes, right? A lot of the ethics efforts right now are because this is the new green. So I happen to be rather cynical about a lot of the early efforts in ethics. I do think, though, that just like green, it was a lot of fronting initially. Like everybody was like, oh, yeah, we put on a couple solar panels. You know, like everybody just wants to like have a thing. But then it actually does become real. In privacy, there's some interesting considerations here. I guess I'll pass to you first, Scott, and then Ariel, if you've got things to say. Is around what we collect. So in mental health, there's folks that'll mention if they're having suicidal thoughts, or even made attempts potentially, or if they've changed medications. Should we plan on encryption being basically counted on surefire if we can crack it, and allowing almost anything to be tracked, or is there some information that maybe we don't even want to go up altogether? Are there kind of bounding boxes around that, or should we count on making it so darn secure that we feel comfortable hurling whatever personal stuff into the cloud?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a big fan of Ken Wilber's integral model, and I didn't have that slide in here, but I think that part of my thinking is it offers a really strong model, and it was great to see it referenced yesterday by John from Evolution, for tackling this kind of complexity, because this is a very complex thing with multivariate, with many stakeholders, many parties, many considerations, and there's just no easy answer to this, and we're figuring this stuff out, even at the same time that technology is just coming at us at a breakneck pace, and we're trying to deal with these issues. So, that's a model that I think, and that's a model actually that we're going to be fleshing out and turn it into kind of a program we think that companies in this space could use to help figure out that kind of questions.
Just maybe as a quick nutshell for the folks who might not be familiar with Wilber, what would be the constituents of that be? So in order to start thinking through that from an integral standpoint, just what are the exercises you guys are going to go into? Because that might start the mental gears for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, part of the exercises is taking a team or an issue, placing it kind of in the center of the model, and that gives you immediately at least 4 different perspectives that you can take on that issue. And then quite often what you want to do, or mostly want to do, or we recommend you do, is you include an experiential process, and there's been quite a few great experiential processes here, which will drop you into stillness, and then emergent action will arise out of the other side. That is much stronger than the usual traditional approaches.
Brainstorm or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So it's using some of the same sort of tools that actually, to my mind, kind of inform this movement, if we want to call it. I'm not sure what we call TT. But
I'm not sure either. Yeah.
Which is great.
That's
It's
Nicole.
part of what makes it so magical, for sure.
And I haven't dropped into stillness to make a decision. I got to hang out more with Nicole or something. Ariel, your take on this idea that obviously Scott, there's letting us know there's a lot to grapple with. Clearly, you had said the same. Do you have thoughts around sort of if we should make security tight enough to be able to hurl anything and everything as private as can be into the cloud? Should that be the goal, or should we maybe even think twice about what gets tracked?
We should totally think twice about what gets tracked and how safe it is and what can be done with it. And I think you need to take the privacy by design approach. So anyone who's not familiar with privacy by design, it was created by Anne Cavoukian. She became the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. I happen to be from Ontario. And she looked at 7 principles for privacy by design. And her approach to privacy by design is that you have to think about the end-to-end solution with privacy in mind at every step of the way. So from the beginning game to the end game, you have to think through privacy. Privacy is not a zero-sum game. Privacy is a win-win. You store your information. It has to be user-centric, so you have to think about privacy as the user's right. It's not the company's right to own your data. It is the user's right to have privacy. And when you start with that as a first principle, what do you end up creating around it? How do you make it secure? And what do you store? And then how do you create an easy exchange between individuals for what you can do with that data, given that the privacy has to be in place initially?
So privacy by design is a framework that maybe people could look up.
Privacy by design, you can look it up. It's a 7-principle framework. I also recommend looking at the Sage BioNetworks privacy framework. That's another one that we use, and that's particularly around biodata. And so those are sort of the 2 kind of highest levels, aside from, of course, GDPR, which we also follow, and HIPAA. HIPAA compliance is not that hard. GDPR, it turns out, is really difficult. It has taken us months and months and months and months and months to become GDPR compliant, even though we thought we were doing a good job in the first place. So if you're thinking about building an app, and if you will ever sell it in Europe, you need to be GDPR compliant. So take a look at it now, and those principles will probably be, over time, moving it closer to North America. So plan with GDPR in mind.
Yeah, maybe just a tad bit on that. We got about a minute here. We're going to be wrapping up. GDPR moving its way over. I think there's a sense like, man, they're taking data real seriously, more than we are. That's going to shuffle over. Where does that start? What can we maybe expect the tech landscape, the rules landscape to shift, if there's a way to nutshell it as we close?
Oh, I can't nutshell that in 1 minute.
Yeah, nothing at all. No high level like, man, well, this kind of info, without a doubt, we're not going to be able to do these things with.
So one of the basic principles of GDPR is you always own your data, and you have to be able to rescind it from the cloud whatever happens. So that's probably the hardest thing to think through, because as somebody, if you think you want to use somebody's data, you want to de-identify it, then you want to be able to separate it, and you want to be able to potentially give it to a third party. Now you've created this long chain through which the data can't be rescinded. So that's probably the best thing that GDPR has done for our privacy, is creating that rule.
All right, you did a good job nutshelling that. See, it wasn't impossible. All right. Hey, everybody, let's thank Ariel and Scott here for having such a great panel.
And Dan.
All right. Glad to be here, guys. Thanks so much.